From rags to riches, today we're talking about some wide receiver 3s that have wide receiver 1 potential that I'm absolutely loving the values on in my underdog and redraft leagues right now. Starting off with player number 1, and it's going to be Diontae Johnson for the Carolina Panthers. Now, hear me out. I think I've been one of the biggest Diontae Johnson truthers for the last 2 years. He's on every dynasty team that I have, and I am drafting him aggressively in my underdog leagues because Diontae Johnson is an absolute target hog. Now, I've posted about Diontae Johnson, and every stinking comment that I always get in these type of videos is, cool, man, he can command the targets, but my dude cannot catch the football. He's got butterfingers. Now, I will agree with you. He has had some issues catching the ball. But when you're talking about a guy that even last year in 13 games had 87 targets, the year before that 17 games 147 targets, 169 targets in 2021, 144 targets in 2020. Targets are earned, not given. Now, I will say this. The one part that was really exciting for me about Diontae Johnson last year compared to the years previous is that his yards per reception actually went up to 14.1, and he had 5 total receiving touchdowns in 13 games. Diontae Johnson, to me, when he's absolutely at his peak, we're talking about a guy that back in 2021 was the wide receiver 8 on a points per game basis. The year before that was wide receiver 22. Now, I really chalk up the last 2 years of Diontae Johnson's really poor performance, not only up to injury, but also up to the fact that Diontae Johnson was getting the ball thrown to him by Kenny Pickett. When he had Big Ben throwing him the ball, Diontae Johnson was an absolute dog as a wide receiver. Now, Diontae Johnson gets traded to the Carolina Panthers. He is 27 years old, so he's entering the prime of his career, and he is playing with Bryce Young, who arguably one of the best things that happened for Diontae Johnson was Big Ben at the end of his career really had a noodle arm. Now, I'm not saying that Bryce Young has a noodle arm, but it's not the strongest thing that we've ever seen. So all of a sudden, give me some Diontae Johnson, who is very effective in and out of routes and really quick throws in a Dave Canales offense. I am all over some Diontae Johnson because let's not forget last year, Adam Thielen, Mr. Super Old 32-year-old Adam Thielen, put up wide receiver 25 points per game numbers. And if you guys do not remember, Adam Thielen started off like the first 4 weeks of the season super hot. In week 2 had 20 fantasy points, 31 fantasy points in week 3, 15 fantasy points in week 4, 27 fantasy points in week 5, 28 fantasy points in week 6. So when we're looking at Diontae Johnson is more talented than Adam Thielen. Yes, did they bring in Xavier Legette as a rookie wide receiver? Yes, but I imagine the 3 wide receiver sets is going to be Diontae Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Xavier Legette. That's going to give Diontae Johnson the flexibility because Diontae Johnson can play as a true X, and he can also play in the slot, which makes me super pumped for Diontae Johnson. And like I said, if Diontae Johnson can play a full year and get the same amount of targets, like if he can get 150 targets at this current cost, we could be looking at Diontae Johnson as a back-end wide receiver 1, and you're having to draft him in your underdog drafts at wide receiver 44, overall player 72. So you're getting quite the discount on a guy that I think should be going a little bit higher. But I think he's a wide receiver 3 right now, even arguably a wide receiver 4 that has wide receiver 1 upside. My second player that's a wide receiver 3 right now, but has a wide receiver 1 overall upside is going to be Jordan Addison. And hear me out with Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison's an absolute baller. If we look at his whole entire profile, absolutely emerged, made Kenny Pickett into a round 1 pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers, proceeds to get an NIL bag to transfer to USC, demolishes at USC as he did at Pittsburgh, gets drafted with pick 23 to the Minnesota Vikings back in 2023, comes in as a rookie and absolutely puts on for the city with a wide receiver 30 points per game with 13 fantasy points per game. Now, if you actually look at the game logs when he had Mr. Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball compared to when they had other quarterbacks throwing him the ball, of course, the numbers look a lot better with Kirk Cousins. So if you look at this, that's where a lot of people are saying, well, this is why I can't trust Jordan Addison. I can't even trust Justin Jefferson with the J.J. McCarthy, with the Sam Darnold. My argument is in year 2, not only is Jordan Addison going to level up this offseason, but we've already seen elite level type upside from Jordan Addison, a guy that could potentially be a back-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, maybe middling wide receiver 1, maybe is not in Jordan Addison's range of outcomes. The fact of the matter is Jordan Addison is being drafted in that same range of a guy that should be going earlier, where he's wide receiver 39 on underdog, overall player 67. And Jordan Addison is just one of those guys that when we're just continuing to look at his overall value, I know the concern is with that quarterback play, but when you look at the road of his screener and you really compare his year 1 to a lot of players in year 2, really, there's a few busts on the list, but not as many as you might think, which makes me super pumped for a guy like Jordan Addison heading into year 2, and especially with this discount that we're getting in underdog ADP. Listen, it's hard enough to build your teams with solid depths of wide receivers because right now the whole fantasy football community is going after these wide receivers. So we really need to address how we can get the most squeeze of the juice out of our later round wide receivers. And I absolutely love some Jordan Addison, targeting him everywhere. Let me know what you think of Jordan Addison down below. My third wide receiver that I think is right now being valued as wide receiver 3, but is going to turn into a wide receiver 1, is going to be Curtis Samuel. And right now, all the hype with the Buffalo Bills offense is with Keon Coleman as the extra great level rookie wide receiver that he is. But let's not forget, really, it's Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel. Like, those are the players that are going to be getting the majority of the touches. And Curtis Samuel right now going off the board as overall wide receiver 50, overall player 91. Now, when we're looking at Curtis Samuel's overall career, you will say to me, Caleb, Curtis Samuel's been used more as like a gadget type player than an actual alpha level wide receiver. And I would agree. This is not the same thing as when Stephon Diggs left the Minnesota Vikings and came over to the Buffalo Bills at the ripe age of 27. This is Curtis Samuel coming from the Washington Commanders, going to the Buffalo Bills at age 27, but a guy that has only ever put up wide receiver 44 and wide receiver 48 numbers, which is not great on a points per game basis at all. But the thing is, when you look at his overall game log for last year, he really kind of started off. He was decent. I mean, 11 fantasy points in week 1, 18 fantasy points in week 4. In week 5 had 18 fantasy points. Week 6 had 14 fantasy points. And then kind of from there, things ended up going a little bit downhill, but then he really ended the season off on a pretty strong note, had 3 straight games, 19, 10, and 21 fantasy points. And so when I'm looking at Curtis Samuel in this overall offense, I'm looking at a guy that's really only ever had snap shares of around 70% of the snaps in an offense. And in this Buffalo Bills type offense, he's going to need to get more snaps. And the fact of the matter is, last year he was wide receiver 42 on targets. That's going to have to go up because Josh Allen is going to have to throw the ball to someone. And when I've done my projections for Curtis Samuel, I mean, we're talking about a guy that's going to get around 101 targets, 69 receptions, 759 yards, and 5 total touchdowns. So while I'm not projecting him by any stretch of the imagination as the wide receiver 1 in this offense, I have him and Keon Coleman so close in their projection that it's hard for me to really value one over the other. And the thing that we have to remember with Curtis Samuel is, like I said, Curtis Samuel's going at wide receiver 50, Keon Coleman's going at wide receiver 47. We've never seen any type of fantasy football production from Keon Coleman. You could make the same kind of argument for Curtis Samuel, but I think Curtis Samuel's actually a more talented wide receiver at this current moment. Josh Allen's going to have to throw the ball to someone. I mean, I have Dalton Kincaid somewhere around an 18% target share. I have Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman right around that 15%. I think there's a chance that Curtis Samuel could end up dominating and get somewhere around a 20 to 22% target share, and that's going to be enough for Curtis Samuel to absolutely boom up the rankings. Now, getting to that wide receiver 1 territory, it's definitely going to have to take him being an absolute dominant alpha, but when we're talking about guys in this range, like a Cortland Sutton, a Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, Rashid Shaheed, I think Curtis Samuel with the quarterback play is enough for me to be all hyped for Curtis Samuel. So I absolutely love Curtis Samuel as a wide receiver 3 that could turn into a wide receiver 1. Now, moving on to my fourth wide receiver 3 that could turn into a wide receiver 1, that's going to be Jakobi Myers. And Mr. Jakobi Myers last season finished as a wide receiver 24 on a points per game basis. Literally nothing has changed in this offense besides, of course, them letting Jimmy G go and bringing in Gardner Minshew. And I would argue at this point, Gardner Minshew might be a better quarterback than Jimmy G. And you still got Aiden O'Connell as the backup quarterback, or maybe the starter, depending on who ends up winning this job in camp. But Jakobi Myers, 13.7 fantasy points per game, was the wide receiver 24 last season, 106 targets, 71 receptions. And the thing that makes me really excited for Mr. Jakobi Myers is he's wide receiver 59 off the board. The fact that he finished as wide receiver 24 last season and all of a sudden he's getting like a huge discount makes zero sense to me. It's like people are giving him crap for when he was with the Patriots and he threw that dumb play to make the Patriots win. You guys all remember it. He threw it like behind the line of scrimmage at a lateral and it was a tie game and ended up losing the whole entire game for the Patriots. That Jakobi Myers is gone. This is a whole new Jakobi Myers. And when we're looking at him, only 71 catches on 106 targets. He was wide receiver 28 on targets last year. Wide receiver 10 on a snap share. And as much as we love some Devontae Adams, there's all the reason to believe that a guy like Jakobi Myers can do what he did last season. And there could even be an efficiency jump. I mean, we're talking about Gardner Minshew, who absolutely loved Josh Downs, a slot guy last year. Add that in for a guy like Jakobi Myers. You could see the wide receiver 3 become a wide receiver 1, back end wide receiver 1 pretty easily. Like I said, I don't think Jakobi Myers has wide receiver 1 overall potential. I'm not telling you you're getting an absolute steal at wide receiver 58. There's a reason people are putting him at wide receiver 58 right now, but I think you could paint the picture and see the story of a guy like Jakobi Myers absolutely bursting out and potentially getting into that wide receiver 12 type conversation on a points per game basis. And my last and final wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, that could be a wide receiver 1 is going to be Jerry Jeudy. And I hear you. We've been on this rodeo show before, Caleb. I'm not drafting Jerry Jeudy. Now, Jerry Jeudy, as much as we hate to say it, he has not had a quarterback as talented as Deshaun Watson. Yes, I'm saying Deshaun Watson is more talented than Russell Wilson. And let's be completely honest, Jerry Jeudy's been an absolute bust in his NFL career up to this point because he hasn't been able to produce on an elite efficient level. But let's not give Jerry Jeudy all the crap because last year, wide receiver 19 in 2022 on a points per game basis. So there definitely was a little bit of life with Jerry Jeudy, but then last year only 8.9 fantasy points per game in the 16 games played, wide receiver 55. So if we really want to go look at this 2022 game log, this is what has me excited about Jerry Jeudy because I do think Deshaun Watson's a more talented quarterback than Russell Wilson. And as much as we have Amari Cooper and David Njoku, I think this offense is going to be passing the ball a lot because you got Jerome Ford, Nick Chubb's coming off an injury. I know Kevin Stefanski likes to run the ball, but I think Deshaun Watson's going to have to start getting in a rhythm, throwing the ball a ton to become the best version of Deshaun Watson. But when we absolutely look at Jerry Jeudy back in 2022, so hear me out, it's 2 seasons ago. I know it's nothing crazy, but when you look at week 14, 33 fantasy points, 14 fantasy points, 17 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points, 24 fantasy points. He had an absolute wide receiver 10 on our points per game numbers over the last 5 weeks of this season. Now, it's a super small sample size, so I'm not over here saying, yeah, he's just going to do that on the whole season, and boom, he's a wide receiver 1. But I will say, we've seen a small stretch of a Jerry Jeudy be a wide receiver 1 overall potential, and I think he could definitely slide into that role in a Browns offense. We don't know what's going to be happening with the snap share, with the target share. I do have my projections starting to get pretty dialed in with this Cleveland Browns offense, but what I will say is I think Jerry Jeudy, at his current cost over here on Underdog, where he is going as wide receiver 61 over player 123, makes me excited for Jerry Jeudy potentially having the upside to be an overall wide receiver 1. So let me know what you think of these wide receivers. Do any of these wide receiver 3s have wide receiver 1 potential, or am I just being crazy, talking out of my mouth? Let me know in the comments down below. Appreciate for you for tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button if you like fantasy football content, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.